This is Freddy with Freddy Can Fly, and in today's video I wanted to address a very important issue in the heli community today. And before we get into it, guys, I just want to ask you all a question out there and be honest. How many times has this happened to you? Oh, mother... God... I think we can all agree that's happened to all of us way too many times. In today's video, I wanted to show you guys at least one of my personal tips and tricks on how I remove those stubborn, hard to get out screws. Now, guys, before we get into this, you gotta realize Loctite is one of the most important things on your helicopter. It keeps it apart, it keeps it safe to fly. But misuse and sometimes over Loctiting of certain screws on the heli, sometimes you cannot get those things out. You go to back them out, the head rounds right out. Now you got to get out a Dremel, you got to cut into things, you scratch up parts, and you end up spending money that you don't need to spend. So obviously, before we get into the actual video itself, guys, you need to have an understanding of how to apply the Loctite correctly so that when it's time to take it out, this method will make it that much easier. With that being said, guys, let's go over some of the tools I've got prepared for us, and we'll go ahead and we'll get into it. Alrighty guys, so we've went ahead and we've prepped all of our equipment. Our soldering iron is nice and hot and solder free, okay? Now we've got the part in front of us here waiting to be stripped apart. And usually what I'm going to do, guys, is I like to kind of test the waters, you know, see where we're at on each screw as far as Loctite feels. And really this is just a personal judgment call. But for example, what I'll do is I'll get my tool in there and, you know, whether this is perfectly Loctited, overly Loctited, or under Loctited, okay? Don't wrench on it. Give this a small little turn. Sorry, it's a bell crank keeps moving on me. Give this a small little turn and kind of see how snug it feels. I mean, you can tell if that Loctite's about to give or if it's going to hold on, okay? And so I'm giving this a pretty fair amount of pressure, and I don't feel like it's going to budge. So here's the kicker to this, guys. Stop at that point. Don't continue. This is how you you round out the heads. As you think you got it, you give it that one extra turn, bam, it's rounded out, and now here comes the Dremel, okay? So if I just feel like, hey, you know, this is a little tight, you know, once again, doing all the heli build work I do, I don't even risk it. I heat it up, I take it out, that way I know it's safe. But just for hell's sake, you guys, you know, just kind of, you know, feel it out. It feels tight, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to heat this one up and see how it comes out. We're just going to take the tip of that soldering iron and we're going to try to stick it right inside that ball. And guys, these heat up pretty quick. It doesn't take too long. And why that's taking place, let's go ahead and we'll talk about a couple things here. First thing, guys, is I want to avoid any sort of nasty comments because you guys are damaging helis using a soldering iron, okay? So just make sure when you're doing this, you use safety and precaution, no burns, you know, don't hurt yourself in any way. But also realize, guys, this is mainly metal components, but there are some that are acceptable to heat that can cause damage. These gears, don't touch them with your soldering iron, okay? You'll end up melting the gears, scarring the gears, you have to replace them. If you're working up on the main frames, be careful of things like wires, you know, etc. I think you get my point, okay? This is just an option for you. No liability on this end, okay? So, playing it nice and safe, everything feels good here. You can touch that bad boy, and it's hot, okay? Nice and hot, and that's what we want, that's what we're going for. Same rule kind of applies here, guys. Don't leave it on there for 14 hours, okay? Just give it a good couple minutes, let it get nice and hot. Now, watch how awesome this becomes. I'm going to give it that same amount of pressure before. I can feel it slip in. There it is, right there. Nice and easy. It almost flows out just like butter, you know, nice and smooth. Careful, that screw's going to be hot. Now, here's something cool I want you guys to see, and hopefully I can capture this on my camera. I'm not sure if this is due to heat or just, you know, how old this Loctite is, but I've seen this with almost every screw I've removed here. And if you guys can capture that, you'll see that the Loctite got almost powdery. You know, it almost turned into this fine chalkiness. And I'm not sure if that's because of the heat or not, but if it is, basically what that heat's doing is it's just breaking that bond away, turning it into dust, allowing you to back that right out, okay? So, you know, once again, careful with touching that, guys. It's still pretty dang warm. But what I like to do, let's go ahead and do an instant cool down on that. Set this to the side. This is where our rubbing alcohol comes in handy. Get some flow in here. And what I'm going to do is this alcohol will almost cool this metal instantly. So be really careful and just scrub them threads real good. Get out the old handy Freddy napkin here. Counterclockwise, twist clockwise. And I just saved myself at least a couple bucks by not having to replace and buy a brand new ball. Okay, so let's go ahead. We did one of the balls. This is a little more robust. Just to prove to you guys that this method works, let's go ahead and tackle one of the smallest screws on this helicopter. Alrighty guys, so here we go. This is going to be the big test. Now, the larger your screws get, the tougher they're going to be regardless, right? Strip screws usually come from those little guys, the little tiny guys that everyone overlooks. One click and you're done, okay? So, let's go ahead and let's get that heat on there. And with these littler ones, guys, the sharper your tip on your soldering iron, you know, the easier you can get in there. Mine's a little bit too fat, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of angle it down a little bit and kind of more set it flat on the top of the surface of the solder, or I'm sorry, not the soldering iron, of the screw, as compared to actually sticking it down into the hex portion, just because I don't want the heat of this to ruin my grips, you know, the teeth that I can get off of this. So let's give this one a minute. Now this is a fairly smaller screw. It shouldn't need as much heat for as long a period of time. Once again, be that personal judge. Watch any easy damageable parts on there. And I feel like that should be pretty good. The soldering iron gets pretty hot. Now be careful once again, guys, because this whole unit gets pretty damn warm pretty fast, okay? So I'm going to try to capture this a little bit more up close. I'm sorry how small these screws are, guys. Let's see if we can get some focus. Right there looks good, okay? I'm going to go ahead and insert my tool. Now before you go wrenching, guys, we got to figure out if we need more heat or not. I'm going to give this a little bit of a turn. Ooh, wow, that one melted really good. Nice and easy. Comes out nice and easy. Guys, as silly as this seems, a lot of people are going to watch this and go, oh, it's just a soldering iron, you know. I do that, or I thought of that, or something, and that's fine. I mean, this is by no means an invention of mine or an original idea or anything. But you would be surprised at how many years I've spent not doing this. You know, it almost made me feel silly when I realized, God, I could have saved so many Dremel cutoff wheels and so many frames and so many, you know, hours just doing this one little method. So it really works, guys. It's really efficient. As always, let's get some rubbing alcohol and let's keep these screws clean. Because if you're going to reinsert them, guys, they've got now melted powdery Loctite on them, probably grease and oil from flying. Don't just stick new Loctite on and reinsert it, because now you've got an under Loctited situation where you could potentially have a fatal outcome from the heli. Okay, so we've cleaned off our screw. Careful with these little ones. They can slip away and get lost real easy. Okay, and we've got ourselves basically a brand new screw. Now there is one more thing I want to throw at you guys. If you plan on reusing a screw, our screw has been cleaned. For the most part, I would say it's at least 80% Loctite free on the surface, okay? Now, you got to realize you've also applied Loctite down inside, you know, into where the threads were at. And what I usually do at this point, and for this what we're going to do is we're going to flip over to the side that we used our removal for the bell crank ball, because it's a little easier for you guys to see. What I do is I also clean each individual thread before restoring the previous item that was connected to it. So in this case, it's going to be a ball. And what I'm going to do with that, guys, it's a fairly easy process. I'm going to dip this in rubbing alcohol. Just give it a real quick dab. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread it in and thread it out, and thread it in and thread it out, and thread it in and thread it out, in and out and in and out. Just a bunch of times. We can now reinsert the screw with fresh Loctite on there. And as always, let's go ahead and give this one just another real quick clean off. and then it's good to go. Now, for more information, guys, on how to properly apply the Loctite to avoid certain scenarios in the future where you're over Loctiting, watch my How to Loctite Properly video. It covers in step by step how I use my methods to apply my Loctite. You know, to make sure the screws are in, safe enough to fly, but when you want to remove them, it almost just takes a real quick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can back it right out, and that screw will last you a lifetime for the most part. So that's basically it, guys. You can now go around to each individual screw on here, and you can start removing all the screws. Alrighty, guys, so basically that's gonna sum it up. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward process. We'll do a quick recap for you. Materials needed, you know, your soldering iron, make sure it's nice and hot, make sure it's solder free on the tip, that way you're not making a mess all over your screws so they can be reused. And make sure you practice safety with this, guys. I don't want anyone out there to get hurt or burned because I gave them this crazy idea. So be safe with your soldering iron at all times, okay? And you know, apply it to the tip of your screw, let it get hot enough. Test those waters, make sure you're not rounding that out, guys. It's so easy to overturn a screw, and then this process goes right out the window, okay? So basically my thoughts about this process, guys, I do this on every screw, at least when it belongs to someone else's helicopter, because I would rather take the time to do it, get the screw out safely, than try to rush it and now I have to Dremel it out. This will work. I can't put this in gold, I can't put this in writing for you, but this has worked for me successfully. If I had to give it a percentage, I would say at least 85% of the time. We'll give it an 85, which is a high rating when you think of how many screws are on this helicopter. If there's 85 screws on there and you removed them all using this method, 85%, it's a lot less Dremel time, okay? So, for the most part, guys, that's going to sum it up. I really hope this is a helpful video for you. I feel like it's a great technique. And for some of you out there that haven't thought of this or hadn't tried doing this, you might find it very useful. With that being said, one last quick note for you guys before we close off for the day, and that's going to be very, very cautious if you're working on the front end of the heli of the metal self-tapping screws into plastic, okay? Don't heat those. I mean, maybe for a quick second, give them a quick heat, but you don't want to melt or warp that plastic on things like the tail case and stuff like that. So self-tapping screws, give them a quick heat, but for the most part, that Loctite should break free on self-taps. This is mainly for metal into metal threaded screw applications, okay? So that's going to do it for tonight, guys. Thank you very, very much for watching. I do appreciate all the comments and all the subscribers that I have. You guys mean the world to me. So as always, remember, Freddy can fly, so can you.